Welcome, everybody, to our session, The Data Speaks, status update of the SDG 6. My name is Maggie Cosida. I'm with UN Water, and I'm the Global Monitoring Specialist at the Integrated Monitoring Initiative for SDG 6. So I welcome you all in this session. You will be hearing about our latest, the results of our latest data drive in 2023. And the different custodian agencies will present their results. And also, I would like all to let you know that the indicator reports, the status update of 2024, have been released. So feel free, you will have a QR code, feel free to visit the website. So I will just call up our first speaker, William Reitert from UN Water, to give us an introduction. And thank you for joining.
Good morning, everybody, and it's fantastic to see a full room here. I'm going to be telling you a little bit about the Integrated Monitoring Initiative before we get into the real meat of the session, which is the results of the 2023 data drive. As Maggie said, my name is Will Reedhead. I am the coordinator of the UN Water Integrated Monitoring Initiative for SDG 6, and I work with UN Water based out of Geneva. Those of you who don't know UN Water, we are a coordination mechanism in the United Nations system. We have more than 30 UN agencies who are our members and more than 40 global organizations working on water and sanitation who are our partners. And we are a coordination mechanism. So our job is to try to synergize and increase the impact of the different initiatives happening in the UN system and globally on water and sanitation. My part of the UN Water Work Program is the Integrated Monitoring Initiative, and we focus on monitoring and reporting against the 11 SDG 6 global indicators. So on this slide, you can see the 11 indicators, and I'm sure you have them all memorized by now, so I'm not going to go through them. But there's 11 indicators, and there's 8 UN custodian agencies who have the official mandate from the member states to be to develop and to implement the 11 global indicators. We have been around since 2015. So our project is linked to the SDGs. We are supported by these 7 donors here, so thank you very much to those of you who are in the room. You know who you are. So here you see our purpose and our goal and our phases. But basically, the idea of the Integrated Monitoring Initiative is not just about getting data from countries and putting it into various global platforms, but it's about empowering different audiences to use those data for bringing about policy change. We think that the data, the evidence, is a key driver to delivering the SDG 6 at the global level. We're in our 3rd phase now. So the first phase was about developing the indicators and getting the global baseline. The second phase was about building capacity in countries to do better quality data and to have the basis, the foundation they need to do this in the long term in those countries. And the 3rd phase is more about building the ownership and the mainstreaming within the countries, finding ways to make it more useful for them. So it's not just about sending data to us, but actually building it to their own processes. We have been around for this is our 3rd phase now, so it's our eighth year, I think. You can say our activities have primarily been about building capacity and collecting data. So during phase 3, we're going to continue doing that. We've actually gotten pretty good coverage of data for the 11 indicators across the world. I'll show you a slide in a second showing how many countries are reporting. But during this phase 3, we're going to keep doing capacity building. We're going to keep collecting data. We're going to have more increased time series on these data, which allows us to have better targeted messages. Those of you, all of you know the 2023 Water Conference. We input data into the preparation for that conference. So we helped develop really good messages that fed into that. Also for the 2023 HLPF in-depth review, we provided data. And we'll be doing this on a regular basis to a number of upcoming events. For example, the One Water Summit and the Summit of the Future this year, we'll be giving data into those. We do reports, and you'll hear about those reports soon. We've finished our third data drive this last year, and we'll be talking about the results of that. And we have a fourth data drive planned in 2026. So that's kind of the business as usual for us. So data collection, capacity building, and report writing. But additional things that we'll be doing in phase 3, which, as I said, is about mainstreaming and integrating. We want to turn attention not just to reporting, but to about how people are using the data. Okay, so we're calling that data to policy. So, for example, we want the SDG data to inform national target setting, voluntary national reviews, the common country assessments in the UN system, things like that. To make that happen, though, I mean, think about it. One value per indicator per country isn't a lot. You can't do a whole lot with that. So we need to find ways to make it more meaningful at the country level. So disaggregation is one obvious thing we want to be focusing on, but something that we're calling contextualization. So even for indicators that can't be disaggregated, we want to find ways to interpret them in a meaningful way that tells us, for example, about gender or about climate change. We have a data portal, the SDG 6 data portal. That's been around now for over 5 years, so we're continuing to develop that. The latest thing we're doing is developing functionalities for river basins. So we want to disaggregate down to that very important functional level of river basins. But we'll also be thinking about different administrative units. What we've learned over the last 8 years is that we provide capacity very broadly, but where we engage with a country on an individual basis intensively, that has a lot more impact. Has a lot more impact in terms of sustainable capacity, quality of data, but also in terms of building regional champions and partners for the initiative. So we're going to be doing more of that. So every year we're going to be identifying a few countries with what we're calling intensive support. And finally, I mean, it's amazing to say this already, but we're more than halfway through the SDG period. So we have to think about now what it means for the future for global monitoring. So we're beginning to reflect on our indicators and what has worked on them and what has not worked so much. So there'll be a comprehensive review by the Interagency and Expert Group on SDG indicators in 2025. So these are the focus areas for this third phase for IMI. But what we're here today to hear about is the latest data drive and the results. So here you can see the 11 indicators. There's actually 12 because we've split sanitation and hygiene into 2 under 6.2. But you can see the targets we've set for phase 3 with the dark blue line and the progress we have already after the third data drive last year. So you can see that we've actually met the targets for almost all of the indicators in terms of number of countries reporting already, with one more data drive to go during phase 3. So we're pretty happy about this. And what that means is that of the 12 possible global indicators they could be reporting on, the average country is reporting on almost 9 of them, 9 out of 12. That's a big increase over where we were back in 2015 when this all started. So we're very pleased about the coverage that we have across the world. This map, by the way, came from the SDG 6 data portal, and the data portal has data on every single country of the world. So if you click on your country on that map, it'll take you to a snapshot for your country. It'll show your status and your trends for all the indicators. The message overall from the last data drive is that since 2021, the world has seen a modest improvement across SDG 6. So for 7 of the 12 indicators, we've seen the number, globally, the number go up a bit. And we can say things like that now because we have at least 3 data points for all the indicators. So we can see a trend, we can actually see whether it's accelerating or decelerating. But that's only 7 out of the 12. Several of them have actually gotten worse. So overall, we're still off track in terms of whether we're going to achieve the targets by 2030. Just a few other updates of what we've been up to lately. I've mentioned the data portal. So we are now in 6 languages. We are one of the very few UN data portals out there that are actually in all 6 UN languages, so we're quite proud about that. I mentioned disaggregating by water basin. That's actually a very technical exercise, so we've got a working group working on that, developing base maps. We're doing some pilots to see how the disaggregated data will be used. And that'll be going on for the next few years. Gender contextualization, that's the other part we're focusing on right now, on how we can make the indicators more relevant for more than just water and sanitation defined narrowly. So we've come up with tools for how to interpret the 11 global indicators through the gender lens. And we're going to be rolling that out across the world. That'll be a really powerful policy tool. Country support I mentioned. So for this year, we've reached out to 14 countries asking for expressions of interest for what kind of support they'd like from us. And we've gotten responses from 7. And so we're in the process of following up with those 7 right now. Under the UNFCCC climate process, there's a global goal on adaptation. And now they're currently developing indicators for measuring adaptation. One of the work streams there is very much focused on water. So IMI is inputting into this process, and we hope we can come up with some really robust indicators for looking at climate adaptation through the lens of water. And then finally, one of the things I'm personally very excited about is these things called country acceleration case studies. So we look at the data. So now that we have 8 years or more worth of data and several data points, we can see which countries are actually progressing at the national level against which indicators. So we can identify success. So we're actually singling out some of these countries and digging into what drove that success. We do case studies on this with the idea of reaching out to policymakers around the world and saying, hey, country X just did great things on this indicator. This is how. Let's learn from each other. So these are country acceleration case studies. We've had 9 of them so far, and we'll be doing another 3 next year. And then finally, that just brings me to the 2024 progress reports. So 7 of the global indicators did data drives last year, and the other 4 do data drives on an ongoing basis. So we're just publishing 7 new progress reports this year, right now, and an overall brief called the SDG 6 Summary Brief, which is a short document with the high-level messages from all the reports. So those are all available now online on the UN Water website, and the QR code is right there. So if you want to stick your camera up there, you get my picture. Now just capture that code, and I'll be showing it again later during the next presentation, so you'll have another chance to do that. But the reports are all available online. And with that, I will wrap up and hand the floor back to Maggie. Well, let's leave this right here. Thank you.
So thank you, Will. Thank you very much. Thank you for this great intro. We're going to dig a little bit more now into the results of the specific global indicators for SDG 6. So I'm just going to call up all the speakers of the next presentation. These are the representatives of the custodian agencies to just come and sit here in the panel. We're going to have a presentation, slides per each global indicator, and then we're going to have a Q&A session. So first off, I'm not sitting. Go ahead. So first off, we're going to start with Rick Johnson from WHO. 6 about indicators 6162 and 631. So the floor is yours.
Thanks so much. I'm Rick Johnston from WHO, and I'm going to share some findings from the WHO-UNICEF Joint Monitoring Program on behalf of WHO and UNICEF. So the Joint Monitoring Program actually tracks water, sanitation, and hygiene, WASH, in households, schools, and healthcare facilities. And we've established a 2-year updating cycle. So I'm actually going to present results from a 2023 report that came out last year, whereas a lot of the other indicator teams are on a 3-year cycle. So that 2023 report has special focus on gender. Will mentioned that all of the IMI agencies are looking at gender contextualization, and we tried to pull together data indicating how gender intersects with water, sanitation, hygiene, and menstrual health. This chart shows that over the 4 reports that we've had on Washington households over the SDG period, the number of data sources that we draw on has continued to rise steadily. All of our estimates are based on national sources of data, and we had about 8,000 national sources of data in this report. We used about 5,300 of them. The height of the bars, you can see that water and sanitation are pretty high. They're at 4,000, I think, data sources. About half of those are coming from household surveys and censuses, and the other half are coming from routine administrative reporting from local governments, from national ministries, from statistical offices. Far fewer data sources are available for hygiene, and those are coming only from household surveys. This is the basic hygiene indicator under Goal 6.2. And we've just established a database on menstrual health, and we only have 62 data sources, but we expect that one to be growing rapidly. So that's the number of national data sources. This shows the number of countries and the proportion of the population that that represents. So again, we have 4 data reports. From left to right, you see rural, urban, and total populations. And if we take safely managed drinking water, we have about, I think it's 140, I don't know how many, 142 countries with national data, but they represent just over half, 51% of the global population, because we don't yet have national data from China or India. If we look at sanitation, we have a similar number of countries, but we have much higher data coverage because we have data from China and India. And then basic hygiene, we have also fairly high data coverage. Here, the distribution is different, where we have data mainly from low and middle income countries because these data come from household surveys, and high income countries don't tend to conduct household surveys to ask people if they have water and soap in the households. So that's on data coverage. Then let's turn to service coverage. These are the 3 indicators that are related to SDGs. So safely managed drinking water, we see at 72% in 2022. And the rate of progress based on history is not enough to reach 100% by 2030. In fact, the rate of progress would need to be 6 times higher to get to the SDG ambition of universal coverage by 2030. Even basic water, the rate of progress would need to double. It's a similar story for sanitation. Actually, the rate of progress is a little bit higher, but the coverage is a little bit lower at 57%. So similarly, you would need to see rates of progress be 5 times faster to get to universal access, and to double even to get to basic sanitation for all. We are on track to eliminate open defecation, so that's one thing that is on track by 2030. Then basic hygiene, having water and soap available in the home, is also not on track. We would need to see doubling of progress rates. Or I think it's tripling, sorry. Just to highlight for that special focus on gender, I want to call out, we collected data on time and labor spent collecting water from outside the home. This is something that is available from many countries, and we saw that globally about 70% of households that need to collect water from outside the home, that work is done by women and girls. And that's about 1 in 6 households globally. So this is, 1.7 billion people, globally live in households where water needs to be brought in from the households, from outside of the household, and that work is being done primarily by women. There are some interesting geographic distributions here where we see similarly in sub-Saharan Africa, in Central and Southern Asia, it's the women who are doing the work. We do see in Latin America and Caribbean and Northern Africa and Western Asia, men are more responsible for the work, but they're much more likely to have water on premises, so the amount of work to be done is much smaller than in those other regions. And on the right, you can see that we can even calculate how much time is spent. And this ranges from over 55 minutes on average in Malawi to less than a minute in some of the other countries that have a lot of water on premises. And again, on the right side there, you see it's the women and the girls who are doing the bulk of that work, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. We actually calculated that about 200 million hours per day are spent collecting water from outside of the home by women and girls. So there are huge inequities here that the data allow us to ventilate. I just want to say a brief word about schools. Just 2 months ago, we launched our report on Washington schools, which had a thematic focus on menstrual health in schools. And the same bar charts show the evolution over the 4 reports that we've published, with increasing numbers of countries having data and increasing percentage of the global population having data. But the disaggregated data remains a challenge. So a lot of countries can say separately what the situation in primary schools or secondary schools is, but very few can say what's happening in pre-primary schools or separating urban and rural schools where we know that there are differentials. For the first time, we had a focus on menstrual health in this report, and we drew upon a list of priority indicators for girls' menstrual hygiene and health that guided us about what types of data we could find. And we found globally only about 2 in 5 schools provide menstrual health education, and only about 1 in 3 schools had facilities in the girls' toilets for disposal, safe, discreet disposal of used menstrual hygiene products. So big gaps, lots of way to go. Next month, we'll be launching our report with a special focus on primary health care, and that will have a special focus on primary health care. This is Washington healthcare facilities. We actually have much less data coverage for healthcare facilities than we do for schools or certainly for households. And because of aging data, we're actually going to have less data coverage in this report than we did in our last one. We have, in particular for China, we have one old data point that's no longer usable to say what the situation in 2023 is. So instead, we're going to be focusing on fragile contexts. The OECD has a list of 60 countries that are considered fragile, and we have higher data coverage in them, so we'll be highlighting the water, sanitation, hygiene, but also healthcare waste management and environmental cleaning situation in those countries. Let me take off my JMP hat and I'll keep my WHO hat on because WHO, along with UN Habitat, are co-custodian agencies for SDG indicator 6.3.1, which is on safely treated wastewater. And the indicator refers to safely treated domestic and industrial flows of wastewater. And we have a collaboration where WHO leads on compiling data on domestic wastewater, and UN Habitat leads on industrial and also total wastewater. So that report has just come out this week. Please do go and download it. Some highlights from the domestic report I'd like to highlight, and also to compare to the last report published 3 years ago, is first on data coverage. The left side, we see we have had high data coverage for the amount of domestic wastewater generated by households. We have over 99% of the population covered from 193 member states. We have slightly smaller countries that have data on how much of that household wastewater is safely treated. It's increased from 116 to 129 countries, though, so we've moved from 80% to 89% of the global population covered. So we're confident in those numbers. You can see that the volumes represented in the 2 reports of wastewater generated are fairly similar in the 2 reports, around 270 billion cubic meters, and maybe a little bit more wastewater safely treated, moving from 150 to 155. But there's not, I would say, strong evidence about trends here. We do see that when you come down to the bottom line indicator about the proportion that's safely treated, we now say 58% of domestic wastewater is safely treated before discharge, or 42% is discharged without safe treatment. And that's slightly higher than in the last report, but I think there's still a lot of evolution in the quality of data reporting, so I wouldn't read too much into that trend or extrapolate or anything. But definitely not evidence of a massive increase over the past 3 years. Turning to the industrial side of things, there has been a big increase in the number of countries reporting on total wastewater as well as industrial wastewater, and UN Habitat compiles this. So actually there were only 73 countries in this report that reported both total wastewater generation and total wastewater treatment. So they could calculate, UN Habitat could calculate that about, let me see, I have a note. I think it was 42% of the global population was covered. Yes. But if you look on the right, industrial wastewater, there's much less data coverage. So countries just aren't reporting on either generation or treatment of industrial wastewater. So without knowing half of this story, the industrial wastewater story, we're really struggling to tell the full picture of wastewater treatment. We had a special focus in this report on wastewater reuse. So there are a number of countries that are increasingly reporting on how much wastewater is being reused. They're not always reporting the level of treatment before reuse, so it's harder to say, is this safe reuse or is it just reuse? But especially within the context of climate change and increasing water scarcity, we expect to see more reporting of wastewater reuse, and hopefully in our future reports we'll be able to tell more about this story. I just have one last slide to reflect on the whole water conference that happened in 2023, where it established the global agenda and countries and partners made commitments. UN Habitat, along with the government of Ghana and 10 other countries, made a commitment around improving wastewater reporting, because wastewater is central to all of the SDG 6 targets, in fact, other SDG targets. But if you look at any of the SDG 6 targets, you can see that without safely managed and treated wastewater, you can't achieve the other ones. I'd love to tell you about each of them, but Maggie's giving me the look, so I'm going to just say that we do have a policy brief. UN Habitat held a series of 5 regional webinars talking about how wastewater treatment and reporting can be improved, and there are some really valuable lessons in this policy brief, which is highlighted in the indicator report. Maggie, I pass back to you.
Thank you, Rick. So I would like now to ask Diana Kopansky from UNEP to step up, and we will be hearing about indicators 632, 651, and 661. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And congratulations, everyone, for the launch of the reports today, especially those that have worked hard behind the scenes and are in this room. We can all celebrate that they're online and hyperlinks are working and people are downloading it, including the media. So this is really exciting because we need to get the message out, not only within this room and online, but actually to everyone. UNEP has been working with member states over the past 3 years to provide data on 3 indicators. These are ambient water quality, integrated water resources management, and changes to freshwater ecosystems. Data indicates that the health and livelihoods of close to 5 billion people could be at risk if water quality and monitoring are not improved. We see countries are taking positive steps. The key to increased ambition and action, though, is in decision-making that's based on timely and accurate data. This is where the SDG indicators 6 come in, and this is why data matters. Let me start with SDG indicator 661, which tells the story of freshwater ecosystems by tracking changes to different types of water-related ecosystems, such as lakes, rivers, and wetlands. These SDG 661 data are validated by 185 countries. UNEP and the work that we're doing is really reaching out across countries, and I'm really happy to see that on all of the indicators that we delivered, we overachieved our targets. This is what we like to do because we're in a rush. It's a race. So to enhance the data interpretation, UNEP applies a traffic light scoring system by sub-indicator, allowing the state of ecosystems to be statistically identified as degraded, that's red, stable, orange, or improving, green. And aggregating the sub-indicators, a national indicator status is also provided. And this has been used to create the current Global Progress Report and to reveal the global and regional status of degraded ecosystems. So as we can see from the bar chart, for the most recent 5-year observation period, 50% of countries have one or more freshwater ecosystem type in a state of degradation. This equates to more than 90 of the 185 countries reporting on indicator 661. And we can see at the time of the introduction of the SDGs in 2015 that ecosystem degradation is at its highest, with 61% of countries having one or more freshwater ecosystem degraded. But there's a clear improvement during this most recent 5-year period, down to 31% of countries. So this is a positive trend when you compare the sub-indicator data that follows introduction of the SDGs. But UNEP doesn't stop there. Through our SDG monitoring journey, water quality data for large lakes has become available, and as an important piece of information on ecosystem status, we wanted to include and ensure this that was represented in our global analysis. So as a result, if we add the degraded lake water data, which is new, the number of countries with degraded freshwater ecosystems, of course, increases. Here are a few more key results that have been analyzed and determined through the 661 data. The line graph at the top shows the trends in water quality observed in 4,300 large lakes. And as we can see, many of the world's largest lakes continue to have high to extreme levels of turbidity and eutrophication. These freshwater bodies support the livelihoods of millions and are critical to support freshwater biodiversity. In about 610 river basins where trophic state events have been increasing, more than 190 million people live. And in the 935 river basins where turbidity conditions have worsened, more than 430 million people live. At the bottom of the slide, we have two maps that represent river basins, depicting red basins with reduced river flow, that's the left-hand side, and then with reduced surface water is the right-hand side. The minimum river flow has significantly decreased in 402 basins worldwide, which is a five-fold increase from 15 years ago. More than 107 million people live in these affected areas. We see that surface water bodies such as lakes are shrinking and being lost entirely in 364 basins, where more than 90 million people live. Let me take you to 632. And we move on to the findings on the ambient water quality indicator. The report on this indicator, countries use data from national water quality monitoring programs that reflect pressures on water quality that are globally relevant. And we also ask countries for information on how they calculated the indicator. This is things like the number of water bodies, the amount of data used, and after each data drive, we then follow up and ask them for feedback on our implementation, as well as for ideas on how we can do this better. This feedback has been really key to the development of this indicator since 2016. Using this approach, in addition to the information on the global water quality, we gain a great insight into countries' capacities and to assess their fresh waters. This is vital information because if countries are unable to understand how their fresh waters are changing, they are going to be unprepared to manage them, which of course has serious implications for human health, climate mitigation, biodiversity loss. We now have data on 120 countries, but we recognize that there are regional gaps that we're working to fill, and the analysis of the results provides clear evidence that low-income countries struggle to collect the necessary data for water resource management. Of the 2 million water quality measurements used in the report in 2023, less than 3%, which is only 60,000, came from the lowest income countries. And the lack of water quality information means that unless monitoring rates are improved, the health and livelihoods of close to 5 billion people will be at risk. This is especially concerning when you overlay these same countries with those predicted to be the most impacted by climate change and population growth. We're all really working hard to fill these gaps. UNEP has projects as well on citizen science, Earth's observation and modeling underway, and through these efforts, for the first time ever, citizen science data has actually been used in the national SDG 6 reporting for this indicator 632 in Sierra Leone and Zambia. So we're really trying to learn from this approach and also to normalize this approach because it has benefits for data gathering and for water resource management. We can't monitor our way out of the water quality crisis, but it's an important and essential prerequisite to management. Finally, let me take you to an interesting and important indicator which tracks the critical solution and application of an approach to achieve the SDGs and SDG 6, integrated water resources management. This slide here, we're seeing some increase in IWRM implementation as a global average, but not at a pace required to achieve the sustainable water management by 2030. The pace that we've observed by applying our analytics will reach that IWRM target at 2049. So this is 25 years from now, right? Many of us in the room may be retired or hopefully retired. And many of you in the room will then be standing on the stage here talking about this is 25 years later. Let's hope not. So in 2030, this will mean that at least 3.3 billion people and the economies of more than 100 countries will have low resilience to cope with increasing pressures, including from climate change. At the country level, around 40% of countries are being left behind. These are the countries that are in orange and yellow, and these are where we believe action needs to be focused. So the data coverage for this indicator allows a complete global picture of IWRM implementation. 191 countries have reported across all 3 rounds, and with 137 countries submitting in all 3 rounds. This illustrates the level of commitment and the recognition that integrated water resource management is critical for countries, not only for SDG 6, but also reaching across a number of the other SDGs. It's interlinked. Another key message from the findings of this indicator report is that financing comes up again and again as a constraint to implementation. Remarkably, 60% of countries report rather ineffective revenue-raising mechanisms for water resources management, and this is obviously a top priority to address. Of course, there are many recommendations that can be made in relation to financing, but we're focusing on 2 main actions. This is, first of all, establishing better revenue-raising mechanisms and securing a higher proportion of national budgets for water resource management. Both of these come together, and integration will be important across sectors. The third message is that countries are telling us that there's a great opportunity to boost resilience to climate change impacts. The added benefit of this analysis is that we deep dived into climate change. So we know that there's a great potential for increasing resilience through better coordination, including across the 4 areas shown on the slide. We have to, though, as a group, make the case. We really have to make this case at the highest national level for how implementing IWRM supports multiple sustainable development objectives, including food and energy security. Many countries and cities are making a headway to address water quality and data challenges, but we're going to need to massively scale up these efforts if we're going to ensure that everyone, everywhere, has fresh water they need and have access to the freshwater ecosystems which we all rely on. So as custodian agency of the 3 indicators, I really want to encourage everyone, whatever level of skill or interest you have, to read these reports in their entirety. Look into the data. This is open source data, and you can use it for multiple things. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Diana. So next, we'll hear from Patricia Mejias Moreno from FAO on indicators 641 and 642. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, Maggie, and good morning, everyone. I'm Patricia. I am also the coordinator of Aquastat in FAO. I'm going to present the progress of the indicators, which refers to the target 6.4, which focuses on how we use water, what is the efficiency and the sustainability of the water use. All the data collection process is done through Aquastat. For those who don't know Aquastat is the FAO's global information system on water and agriculture. It exists since 1994, and since then FAO has been collecting regularly data on water use, mainly in agriculture. We collect data to monitor this indicator every year, so we do that at an annual basis, and the response rate is around 42%. When we account at an annual basis. If we count 5 years, we have around 100 countries responding to the questionnaire, which is not a bad response rate. We can see that there is a diversity in the response rate according to the regions, and we see that especially in sub-Saharan Africa, the response rate is very low, which is a challenge. Let me start with the indicator 641. This indicator is an economic indicator, which says what is the economic value of the water use by cubic meters. So we measure this indicator by US dollar by cubic meter. So we have seen that at global level, there has been an increase of 20%, of 90% of the water use efficiency globally. That means that we are, at global level, we are producing more economic value by unit of water used. However, if we analyze the value of the water use efficiency by country, we see that there are still 58% of countries which have very low water use efficiency. The water use efficiency is very much influenced by the economic structure of the country. So that means that many countries depend on agriculture for their economy, and this is why agriculture has a very low water use efficiency, while is the main user of water by far. In this report, because you have seen that we have the value of the water use efficiency in general, which is $19 per cubic meter. But at FAO, also with member countries, we realize that this value, this data, may not be very meaningful if we don't analyze the components. So there are two main components to calculate this indicator. One is the economic value, the gross value added by sector, and then the water withdrawals, the water use. And analyzing the different components give us a more meaningful information on how the water use is evolving. The purpose of this indicator is to see how much economic growth is decoupled from water use. So analyzing how economic growth is evolving and the water use, we can have better information. And I don't have time to explain, but in the table you can see the analysis by different regions. So when it's green, that means that there is economic growth and there is a reduction on the water use. And when it's red, it's the contrary, right? There is no economic growth and there is an increase in the water use. And we see that the region of the Latin America and the Caribbean is the only region in which there has been a decrease on the water use efficiency. That's maybe because they have an abundant water resources. And now let me pass to the other indicator, which is a completely different indicator. It's the indicator which measures the level of water stress. So it's more an environmental indicator, which tells us what is the pressure of the water use in the availability of water resources. And for this indicator, we have seen that there's been an increase of 3% of the water stress since from 2015 to 2021. We have also seen that there are more or less 10% of the global population lives in countries which are in critical and high level of water stress. Also in the analysis, we noticed that indeed the region which is suffering more the critical levels of water stress is North Africa and Western Asia, and we see a lot of diversity depending on the region and on the country. And then with this slide, I would like to show in the up part of the slide, you see the results of the water stress levels by country. So in red, you see the countries where there is more water stress, and also in the lower part, you see an analysis that we have done at disaggregated level, by water basin level. So you see that there is a great difference between the two maps. So with this, we are working with also with countries, because we think it's important to disaggregate this indicator. Countries are very diverse. In every country, you have a humid area and also a dry area. And when you have the average, you may not show the difficulties of the challenges of the country with water. So now we are working with countries to have more information of this indicator at disaggregated level. And I think I can stop here. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Patricia, very much. So I'm now calling Sonia Koepfel from UNECE. She will talk to us about indicator 652, transboundary rivers.
Thank you very much. And I think this week being about water and peace, everybody knows by now that more than 60% of freshwater resources worldwide are shared by 2 or more countries. And that's why it was such an important step to have a dedicated indicator measuring the progress of transboundary water cooperation among the SDGs, and particularly measuring the percentage of transboundary basin area within a country with operational arrangement for water cooperation. And for this one, UNESCO and UNECE are the co-custodian agencies, so I'm also speaking on behalf of UNESCO here. And I would say, on the very positive side, we are very impressed with the high levels of engagement of the countries. Now, in the third exercise, for the second time, we had 129 replies out of the 153 countries sharing transboundary waterism. And if we look at the 3 exercises, even 143 countries have reported in one of those rounds, meaning a more than 90% response rate for a still sensitive topic such as transboundary water cooperation. If we look at the actual results, we can see some progress, but too low. Only 43 out of those 153 on member states have operational arrangement for water cooperation in place for 90% or more of their shared rivers, lakes, and groundwaters, which is up from 30 UN member states in the last round in 2020. And if we look regionally, we can see the highest level of cooperation in Europe, North America, and Sub-Saharan Africa. But much more progress is needed, still also in Africa, but most importantly in Latin America and Asia. And actually in 20 countries overall, they do not have any operational arrangements for any of their shared basins worldwide. On the other hand, we can see a positive impact of the reporting exercise itself. We can see that the reporting exercise has led to cooperation in the reporting itself, in the Danube and the Rhine, but also between Panama and Costa Rica, for example, and in other basins where they start working together in order to achieve or increase their SDG value. So these are positive signs, but if we look at the fact that the indicator also includes transboundary groundwater, so it looks at transboundary surface and groundwater, we clearly see also that cooperation on groundwater is not yet sufficient advanced, with only 37 countries actually having more than 90% of their shared aquifers covered by operational arrangements. And even there is insufficient knowledge on groundwater. So much more work is needed, and again here the reporting provides an opportunity for more data. Then gender consideration for the first time have been looked at in this reporting. And we clearly see that many countries don't even have the data on gender and transboundary cooperation. So much more work is needed here. In addition, in the third reporting exercise, we look for the first time at climate change, at whether actually the transboundary agreements and joint bodies, basin organizations are actually dealing with climate change. Because the template is much longer. The template, which the countries fill out, gives information on many more aspects. So the reporting, for example, shows that there's already quite some cooperation on flooding, but not enough yet on drought. So much more action is also needed here, and you will find more information in the report, which will be actually launched in our case at the end of September in its full status. So looking at the future, what is needed? We need to address data gaps, particularly regarding aquifers, but not only. We need to enhance capacity building and support the development of operational arrangements, agreements, setting up of joint bodies, strengthening them. We need to also capitalize on the legal framework, such as the global UN Water Conventions. We need to mobilize political will. It's okay, I'm over time. We need to better leverage partner support, work together in the UN system to jointly support countries in transborder cooperation, such as through the Transborder Cooperation Coalition. We need to work on gender. We need to have, for example, more female heads of basin organizations. There are very few, unfortunately, so far. And help countries to integrate climate change into the transborder cooperation arrangement and joint bodies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sonia. Last but not least, so Bruce Gordon from WHO is going to talk to us about indicators 6A1 and 6B1.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to use my first 10 seconds to allow us all to breathe. I was watching all that, and there's a lot of figures, and I guarantee this part is going to be a little bit slower. There's going to be, I think, a couple consistent messages I'd like to give, but we'll just take it down a notch. So, 6A, if you can move, oh, I guess I moved my own slides. 6A and 6B, I think of them as the sort of neglected indicators, but if we think about, the big UN conference and how we're going to achieve all this stuff, that you've presented, there's been a lot of challenges. This is really the data on the how-to. And actually, the data on the how-to is essentially finds itself in just two indicators, and one is around international cooperation, which is essentially looking at ODA, and the other is around local participation. So in short, there's a lot to be done, and I think in the post-SDG period, about trying to figure out how to better capture this. Let's talk about ODA, and I've been to a lot of sessions, and there's a lot of concern about ODA. I think the feeling is, certainly this year, it's going down, and there's been sort of a decline over years. But I wanted to also mention this particular graph is looking at ODA for the year 2022. So there was a slight uptick there. But as a proportion of total ODA across all sectors, there has been a historical low. So I think, yeah, the message here is also about the quality of the aid. And so what I'm not going to present is the proportion of loans versus grants, but it's certainly the concessional loans, that proportion's going up as well. So I think countries are struggling with the aid proposition. Also, just to note that this data does cover, it's not just water and sanitation, it's covering hydroelectric, it's covering water resources, the whole ambit, education, river basin management, but certainly water and sanitation does take a good chunk of this. So a lot of this info is how do you interpret it? It's there, but there's a lot of discussion around, again, quality, quantity, etc. So continuing on the quality piece, one of the things that we felt that wasn't covered in the raw sort of ODA was the extent to which there's alignment between this aid and national plans. And this one's a bit of a tough one because there are lots of wonderful water sanitation projects that actually are not necessarily going through a planning process at national level. We could think of great work by, for example, NGOs like World Vision that may be being done at local level, but they would be considered low or poor alignment because the national government may not be there. So again, there's a little bit of interpretation here, but nearly 1/3 of countries reported that donor funds are poorly aligned with national water sector, and certainly this is more the case in low-income countries. Okay, that's about alignment. And then I think we're going to get on to participation. It's funny because the question is why are we looking at participation? And I think, again, it's okay, don't worry. I'm good. The indigenous angle on this, I think, is very important. We've seen it throughout the conference. Women and gender, Rick was talking about that, the importance in decision-making. You mentioned it, Sonia, as well. So that's what we're trying to get at. We're trying to get at the quality of participation in decision-making processes. But really what we're capturing here is that sort of very high level, there's procedures in place, but the participation isn't necessarily as high, and there needs to be a lot more funding and human resources to allow that to happen. We look specifically at rural drinking water in this on the left-hand side, and water resource management on the right. So I mean, again, a simple takeaway that there's the procedures, and as is usually the case, not enough implementation. Oh, this is one of those tricky slides I'm just going to put it all up. I'm doing this on behalf of my colleague Fiona, so that's why I'm taking this. And so this is done by the UN Water Glass Program, which represents the entirety of the UN system, led by WHO, but very much implemented with UNICEF and a lot of other partners. So you can see that our next cycle of data will be coming out hopefully earlier in 2025, and that the information is being collected from countries as we speak, and it reached more than, I think, 120 countries in the last cycle. And I think that is my last, but I do want to make a plea to you all. I don't think, I suspect and speculate, you didn't come here to see 6A and 6B. But I hope that maybe that's just me feeling insecure. But at the end of the day, this has been neglected. It can be a meaningful indicator. There is a lot that needs to be done on it. I hope that we can all think about this collectively, about how we can improve this for the next cycle after the SDG. So I think I'm in my 2 minutes, but I don't have my timer, Sonia, so I can't be sure. Thank you.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you for keeping the time. I know it's a lot of information to be just communicated in 3 minutes per indicator, so I appreciate your effort. So thus, we also encourage everybody to read the full reports. There are also visual summaries that you can look at. There are also teaser videos, so there is a lot of material that you can look. And thank you very much to the audience. This was also a flow of information for you, many indicators. We're going to open the floor to questions. Also, I need to acknowledge that we have online audience, many people, and they also have questions, so I will also keep 5 minutes for them. But we start with the live audience here, and then we move to the online. So I have one mic. I hope I'm not confusing the mics. For the audience, and then I have one mic for the panel. So maybe we start collecting a little bit, and then, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the presentation. Peter Wisnowski, Stockholm Resilience Center. My question, I'm not making a value judgment now. I'm just, I looked at the data from a researcher's perspective. And my question will be about the quality of self-reported data, and basically whether we can compare the reported data and whether we can actually put self-reported data in a single slide. Because if you look at these questionnaires, especially, I looked in several indicators, and if you look at rationale behind, so for those who don't know, the country fills in the questionnaire and self-awards like numbers from 0 to 100 on different kind of areas. And one example that I found from 651 indicator, one country, X, I will not expose it, gave itself a high score, 100, for gender mainstreaming and board management, just on the basis that the Constitution says that men and women are equal. So I'm just and other countries in turn have other things, and they report much more, and they report on the actions. And the question is, and because it's self-reported data, one question is, how do the custodian agencies, how they take care of the data quality and reliability and comparability? And the second question, hand on heart, especially for the previous speaker who spoke about data for policy, does the UN system trust the reported indicator values to the extent that it is confident in formulating policies based on this self-reported data?
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to take one more question. There was a hand here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, panelists. It was amazing session. Thank you again. My name is Meghna, and I'm a junior rapporteur for this session. I have a lot of questions, but the one question that I would particularly want to ask is that because, Rick, you mentioned that you don't have the household level data from India. Why not? And also, you have mentioned so many growths and how the trends actually help inspire the countries to learn from each other. I would also want to know why not capture also the failures. All the country level data that were shown, I saw a growth in all the trends, but I'm sure there might be somewhere where there has been observed decline. Why are they not being captured? Because when we talk about that, we are so close to our SDG 30 goals. And so I think it's high time that we also talk about failures. So yeah, these were my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Can I just add an example to the previous question? Because on the JMP and the difference between water, sanitation, hygiene, what we noticed was that the hygiene was 100% based on household surveys, where the water and sanitation were closer to 50-50 survey and self-reporting. The hygiene is subterranean. It's really, really, really low, but we're seeing not adequate, but significant progress in water and sanitation. So is the hygiene number reflective of the first question in the difference between self-reporting and survey data? And is there a way to extrapolate in some way from that to the combined self-reported and survey data?
Thank you. Question? Yep.
Yes, I'm from the developing country, so I listen to your presentation. I'm very interested, but has one indicator I want to make I need you clarify. You said that proportion of household in wastewater safety treated up to 89%, but I'm from developing country. You see, more than 70% of rural people, household in household, they have low treated system. So how to compare with that kind of data and information? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Should we just start with this one? So the quality of self-reported data, I guess, is a central one. And then we have the specific thing for India. So who wants to answer about the quality of self-reported data?
Okay, I'll give it quickly to Sonia, but I'm the other ones I can't answer, so I'm going to have to. I'll take the one that I can answer. Well, I mean, I think it's a great point, and I think the first point is you don't use it if you have a source that's more accurate and credible. But if you have to use it, there's a couple things you can do. One is what we've done with GLASS is we have given, I think, fairly rigorous guidelines to have a consensus dialogue amongst a wide variety of stakeholders to try to come to some kind of triangulation around a number or around, some sort of assessment. And if it seems wonky, then you go back to the country. Second, I'll give you a specific example of one of the things we had trouble with, and this gets to the trust idea, was we were trying to capture expenditure on WASH. There's a number of targets, 0.5% of GDP, et cetera. And the self-reported data wasn't getting as credible as people would have hoped. And so then we essentially launched a whole new initiative, almost separate from GLASS, called TrackFin, or WASH accounts, that is just very intensive. It required, consultants. It required expertise. It required, 3, 4, 5 months of effort in every country to try to get that, kind of quality of, the rigor, the human resources trained up to get a number from taking into account utilities and everything else, tariffs, household expenditure. So ultimately, sometimes when you make that jump, it is very, very tough, and you have to make your choice when you do it. And let's just say my final point on this, sorry, Sonia, is about the ownership piece, though, because ultimately, like, if it's coming from a country, and even if it's a bit wonky for you. If they don't know where some piece of model data comes from, or if it's a study or whatever, then I think you have more serious problems potentially as far as policy, that influencing policy.
Thank you. So for the indicator 652 on transboundary water cooperation regarding the value of self-reported data. So firstly, already when designing the indicator, we tried to design it actually with some really factual operationality criteria. So is there an agreement? Is there a joint body in place? Do they have regular meetings? Do they exchange data? And actually we asked the countries even to submit their agreement. Then indeed then the template includes on the one hand the first section, which is about the value, but then the second question actually asks additional information on each of the shared basins, where the countries basically need to inform about what they do in their joint body, etc. And we cross-checked those sections, and we find actually quite a lot of inconsistencies. So we go back and communicate with the countries. So actually almost in all cases where we get the first report, we go back to them, we send comments. It's sometimes 3, 4, 5 times back and forth until we can come up with a validated version. And there are also some cases where they're not validated in the end. But usually we manage after this back and forth, including through online sessions, including through comparison with global databases from TWAP and others, to actually come up with a final and I think factual report, and that leads to the fact that I think our data is more or less trustable, considering it's also based on our work and also the cooperation we have with partners and et cetera, et cetera. Just one question was also about whether there are steps back. And I think on transboundary cooperation, obviously we can see that, yes, there can be also steps back. On the one hand, we could see that in some cases the indicator value has actually gone down due to the fact that they have for the first time reported on basins which they did not report on before. And also in some cases, yes, due to conflicts or other situations, indicator value has gone down. But overall, as you can see, still it has gone up a little bit.
Thanks so much. I want to add on to that. Indeed, it is about an ownership aspect. We are on this journey on the SDGs, and it's countries that need to make them. So their self-reporting is really a vital element of it. And of course, in our reporting, all of the data is open and available, and there are this level of transparency where everyone can look and find anomalies, but indeed we do our best and engage and compare and get outliers out. But I think what you said in your presentation is that what we found is it's the journey alongside the reporting. So you might see the report with all of the figures and numbers, but these are accompanied through capacity building, through programs, through sharing, through also improvements in data methods, as we've seen the lakes, when we included the new lakes water quality into the report, the number went down. Because we're learning more and more, and the results and the reporting capabilities are getting better. But I just wanted to say that indeed it is a trust aspect, and we're walking together in this journey. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for what it refers to the target, say 6.4 on water use, all the data we collect are from countries directly, and these are data that are also collected by countries themselves for their own accounting system. So it's water withdrawals and water availability. So it's quite an objective data that we use to calculate these two indicators. And I think, as Diana mentions, we should not forget that this is a country-led process. So data belongs to the country and it has to be agreed with them. And and there is a lot for the validation. I mean, there are mistakes, of course. There are some inconsistencies in the reporting, and this is the role of the responsible agencies, the custodian agencies, to have a dialogue with the counterpart and find the best quality data for the reporting.
Thank you. Rick, if you could also touch on the issue of India as well.
I will.
And this JMP sanitation versus hygiene data, please.
It's all part of the same story.
Okay, perfect.
Right. So for drinking water, sanitation, hygiene, wastewater, it's the governments that are the duty bearers and who have to be accountable. So when you say self-reporting, if it's the government that's self-reporting, that's what we want. We want the governments to have the data at their fingertips about the quality of these services that they are responsible to make sure are delivered. They don't have to deliver it themselves, but they have the mandate to know what the quality of services being delivered are. So in questionnaires, like for the wastewater questionnaires that we rely on, it's often the National Statistics Office that compiles those data from the sectors and reports them. They are the authority when it comes to global reporting and SDGs, and it's not our place to question them. We can point out inconsistencies or errors, and everyone makes errors, so sometimes we get very interesting dialogues when we find a change or an inconsistency or something that seems out of norms, and that leads to good conversations. Where government official systems have gaps is often for informal services or private supplies. And those are particularly important for drinking water, sanitation, and completely for hygiene, because the hygiene indicator is about having water and sanitation, water and soap available in the home. There is no government agency that delivers hygiene services to the household level. That is a self-supply issue. So collecting data directly from populations through household surveys is the best and probably the only way to get that data. But that's not the same when we talk about drinking water services. In high-income countries, you don't rely on household surveys to ask, is the water service acceptable or not? You rely on the regulator, on the agencies, on the NSOs. So I think we see an interesting transition as countries move from informal services to formal regulated services within government mandates. You see the data also transferring from household surveys to official national statistics, and that's good. India is a nice example of this, where they're building really ambitious national databases, including on WASH, including on self-supply and informal services. That has really been spearheaded by the rural program, first Swachh Bharat mission, now Jal Jeevan mission. That rural program has included drinking water quality data. So for India, we have and use data on drinking water quality from rural areas. The urban area, paradoxically, is less advanced than the rural area in terms of data management, because the data are all sitting in hundreds and hundreds of different municipalities. They're not harmonized, they're not aggregated, and India as a whole doesn't have a national picture on drinking water quality in urban settings yet. So when they do, and we're working with them on that, then we'll be able to have nationally representative data for the whole of the country.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I'm just going to take one question from the online chat. Actually, there was one very similar to the one we discussed about the sources and the quality. But also there is one on why should we invest in monitoring water quality? I will we'll read it out. If we are lacking sanitation or, so this is a bit of a cross-cutting, but it's a debate question. You got it. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so there was a question about, this is in response to the water quality indicator. Are there funding sources to gather water quality data? That was the first part of the question. But then someone followed up immediately after, a different participant, and said, does it make sense to invest a lot of money in water quality measurement if we can clearly assume that with lack of sanitation and lack of wastewater treatment, most resources are not safe for consumption? Then we can use the already scarce sources on water treatment solutions rather than water monitoring solutions. Interesting question.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, the question is a bit a little bit cutting across. So if we are not all set with wastewater, why should we invest in monitoring water quality instead of investing in improving, let's say, treatment and so on? So then we don't. So who wants to volunteer? Okay, perfect.
Maybe I can start, because there are actually two indicators on water quality. 6.1 is about drinking water quality, and then 6.3.2 is about more environmental water quality. But the point holds for both, that if you don't have good sanitation, wastewater collection and treatment, you are going to contaminate environmental resources, water resources, and potentially drinking water sources as well. That doesn't mean you don't monitor all of those things. In fact, those can help point to specific areas where sanitation and wastewater treatment are inadequate. I think from a communication perspective, people tend to get more exercised around drinking water contamination than inadequate wastewater treatment. So just for communications, it's more valuable to say, oh my God, the drinking water supplies are contaminated, than, oh my God, the septic tank is overflowing directly into an open drain. You know, you just get more traction there. But I think maybe on 632, did you want to add on about the importance of doing them both?
Yeah, it's definitely both, because it's not only the water that comes from your taps, but the water that flows through your community. And I think that that's quite often the hidden water quality aspect, the ambient water quality, what's in of our rivers, our lakes, also in the wetlands, which actually are great natural cleaners of wastewater and water in certain spaces. And I think that we have to track it all, because it also, with the changing climate, we're seeing blooms, right? We're seeing these algal blooms or increased eutrophication because maybe there's additional use of nutrients or a new nutrient that wasn't in that water system. And we rely on those rivers, lakes, wetlands, for the food that we eat. Let's face it, it's also the water we drink. So if we don't watch the water quality of ambient spaces and rivers, lakes, and others, then exactly swimming or just even what farmers put on their fields in developing countries that don't have high-tech pipes and distribution mechanisms, it's very critical. Thanks.
Thank you.
I just add, I can't resist. Sorry, I know it's a really amazing question, and I have a little bit of sympathy for the questioner. And the reason is, I mean, if emergency situation, you have massive flooding, you have massive contamination, does it make sense to use scarce time and scarce resources when you know it's contaminated? And I think that actually is a problem. I think there's a lot of effort put into water quality monitoring in those situations where we can assume, let's just get this stuff treated. And then the other thing I can't resist is monitoring for what? Because if there has been, WHO's whole thing about water safety planning is by the time you essentially, find E. coli in your water, it's too little, too late, people have ingested it. So really focusing on, reducing those risk from sanitation, chlorine, operational monitoring, all those things. So it's a little bit of what scenario you're looking in, and global monitoring, is a little bit of a different story.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Will, you want to add something?
Yeah, I'd just like to invoke the host's privilege to make one final comment about this. And we are the Integrated Monitoring Initiative, and I didn't talk much about the integration, but this is a great example of why it's so important. This last question about water quality and where to invest the resources touches on what? Drinking water, sanitation, wastewater, ambient water quality. At least 4 of the indicators right there, and you could look further than that. The point is, those are different parts of governments. They have different funding flows. They have different policies. They have different decision-making processes. So whether it makes sense to invest money in monitoring versus in wastewater treatment, no one's asking that question. Because why? They're in silos. So one of the things we're really talking about is this integration piece and looking across the indicators and thinking about the big picture and using evidence to inform your policy. So it's not easy. I mean, we've all seen how hard that is, but that's what we're actually trying to do more and more of as we're in phase 3 and in phase 4 of IMI. So enough for me. Back to Maggie.
Okay. So I wish we had more time for questions, because this is also very interesting, not just for the audience, but for the agencies as well. But unfortunately, we don't. So I would like to invite up Nancy Eslick from she's the Global Water Coordinator of USAID, to give us like 4, max 5 minutes comments, like a closing remark. And then we have one more person, and yeah. So Nancy, floor is yours.
I just want to first of all say thank you so much. We all rely so much on the JMP, and really appreciate the insights that you provided today that the global wash sector relies on. But also that we cannot address the global water crisis without data. We need to, I'm going to take things up a little bit from the data to the big picture. We need to accelerate progress in order to meet the SDGs. But more than that, we need to accelerate progress because the lack of water, the lack of sanitation, the lack of hygiene, these things are holding back millions of people from achieving their potential. From the great work that the JMP and others, what we know is that the crisis isn't impacting everyone equally. The most marginalized people are the ones that are being left behind. So we need to simultaneously address equity, efficiency, and resilience. And in order to address equity, we first need to know who is being left behind across many intersecting identities. In order to improve efficiency, we need to make the best possible decisions about big things, like which countries to prioritize for maximum impact, and smaller things like where do we put the water point to reach the greatest number of people. In order to protect our progress and avoid backsliding, we need to make sure that our investments are resilient in the face of unique hazards in each individual context. The answer to each of these questions is actually the same. It is data. We need to use every tool in our toolbox, but we must use the data we have available to know which tool to use and to improve every decision that we make. Data-driven decision-making has been foundational to USAID's water work for years, and it has fueled our successes and informed us about the things that maybe weren't successes. The selection of priority countries is one way that we leverage data to improve efficiency and equity. Over the past decade, USAID has invested in the national WASH data efforts in host countries, including Ghana, Haiti, Ethiopia, and more, to support our government partners to optimize their decision-making that will accelerate equity and efficiency for their citizens. We have invested in innovative solutions to help ensure that decision-makers have the information they need to make better decisions. The impacts of these investments are seen in terms of improving efficiency, equity, and resilience. I'm going to share an example or two. In Ethiopia, the government is significantly more likely to hit water when drilling a borehole today because they can use groundwater maps that were invested in. This dramatically increases their efficiency. In Madagascar, USAID helped the government collect WASH data on communities that had been historically overlooked to ensure that they were fully included in WASH planning and WASH budgeting. It's a major step towards equity. In Malawi, USAID coordinated with NASA to develop an early flood warning system. The system built resilience to protect people. When 2 large cyclones hit Malawi in 2022, these flood warning systems saved the country an estimated $40 million in losses. It's all because of data, decision-making, and implementation. Moving forward, we're going to redouble our commitments to data-driven decisions through our strategy and through our investments. From a strategic perspective, we've elevated the use of data in our U.S. global water strategy. Overall, we've seen today that business as usual will not get us our vision to a water-secure world. We need to optimize the impact for every dollar we invest and to make sure it's providing maximum impact, especially for those left behind. We need to anchor decisions on good data, and we can't do that without the incredible work that UN Water is doing and all the UN partners. Again, thank you for the JMP. I want to encourage each of you to do your part as we work together efficiently to improve equity. And for those looking more directly to accelerate services, improve equity, and build resilience, consider how available data can help you in this room and others make better decisions. For those of you who are already using data to improve progress, share your findings with others. With the rapid changes in data and the analytics landscape, we can all work together to improve the way we share data to make decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nancy. I would also like to invite Ms. Miriam Harrit. She's the Deputy Director General of the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety and Consumer Protection, BMUV. So we have 5 minutes also from concluding remarks from you, and thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Well, it's an honor to be the last speaker, I think, for today's very interesting session. Thank you very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, dear colleagues, thank you so much for these interesting discussions and presentations. While we all know that we are not on track to reach SDG 6, I would like to sincerely congratulate you that we are definitely on the right way in terms of monitoring. And it's important because we need to see the data in order to understand and improve things. The data of the Integrated Monitoring Initiative, IMI, for SDG 6 gives us, as water and sanitation community and member states, a clear idea where we need to focus our activities. Aside from the data collection, analysis, and publication, thank you for the QR code, the initiative has started to achieve 3 essential objectives which accelerate action on the ground. First, it has created a link between the national and the global level. It is no longer some far-off presentation of data sets in New York. Through the SDG data portal and the acceleration case studies, you brought national achievements, needs, and experiences into the limelight. Others can learn and be inspired by that. Second, you have created access to reliable data which strengthened transparency and thus enabled relevant groups, including non-state actors, to be able to monitor progress and hold actors accountable. Third, within IMI, countries were supported to collect and analyze data. And without wanting to repeat myself, it's important to note this data and evidence for acceleration has become the basis to improve management and inform policy and investment decisions on all levels. Through its work, IMI has over the years also created the databases to underline the cross-sectoral relevance of water and promoted outreach and dialogue with other sectors, from agriculture to energy and environment and other areas. This year now clearly highlights why this is so important. The work on the global goal on adaptation has started, and the works on indicators for the global biodiversity framework are ongoing. Both processes can benefit greatly from the work of IMI SDG 6. We can now include integrated intersectoral approaches into these processes, and this is particularly important for Germany, but not just for Germany, I think for all of us. Both in my role as Deputy Director General for Water at the German Ministry for the Environment, and as such responsible for Germany's national water strategy, and as President of the International Commission for the Protection of the Rhine River, I know that an integrated view of data and a common understanding on the status quo is essential to overcome sector and country boundaries and implement actions. bridging borders, this is what you did. In this regard, IMI is a good example of what we expect to be the outcome of the recently launched UN system-wide strategy for water and sanitation. Close collaboration of UN entities on all levels, from national to global. A clear support structure from member states based on national needs and priorities. Coherence in approaches, definitions, and concepts. And joint action wherever feasible to increase efficiency and impact. We as Germany are happy to support monitoring also by cooperating with UNEP. We have recently finalized a grant agreement to support the work on water quality monitoring within the UN system-wide strategy. As a UN member state, we hope that the forthcoming 2026 conference and the launch of the UN SWS will contribute to accelerated action over the next years. Thank you so much for your dedicated work, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. So, just a very thank you to all our speakers. Thank you to the audience, to the online audience as well. We hope we inspired you. We hope we increase your knowledge, your interest, but also your ambition on the SDG 6 monitoring and indicators. And we wish you all well. And thank you for joining this session. Thank you.